Usually this text is read on Ash Wednesday, which I always find incredibly confusing. I mean, the text says that hypocrites mark their faces to show how pious they are, which is exactly what we proceed to do in that very same service, marking our foreheads to kickstart our Lenten piety. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, Jesus says. Do not sound the trumpet before you as the hypocrites do, so that they may be praised by others. Do not be like the hypocrites who love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Do not look dismal when you fast like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Jesus wants us to practice our piety in secret, which is confusing and on more than just Ash Wednesday. Not so much on the fasting part, since Presbyterians don't really fast, we just go on diets. But today, like every Sunday, we are praying in public with our speaking and our singing. A little while later, we will be passing the offering plate, and some of us will be hoping that we are all generous in public too. Jesus wants us to practice our piety in secret because he says doing religious stuff in public is the quick route to becoming a hypocrite. Saying one thing and then doing another, using our religion to try to score status points instead of keeping the focus on faithfulness to God. This is probably the biggest reason that people give to me for why they are not religious. Sure, I run across the resolute atheist from time to time who has decided that God is just a human construction, but more often than not, I experience people who've been turned off by their experiences of other Christians, with stories of judgments here or bad behavior there. If doing religious stuff in public is an easy way to slide toward hypocrisy, then one way of avoiding becoming a hypocrite is not to do religious stuff in public at all. Practice your faith at home, away from other people, which seems like what Jesus is prescribing, although I'm not sure refraining from public religiosity in our secular culture is necessarily the way toward a deeper faithfulness either. I once heard about a person who once tried to form a prayer group inside of their congregation. One parishioner declined, saying that, quote, she agreed with Jesus that she should go into her closet and pray. Well, when the organizer of the group inquired as to how often she actually prayed in her closet, she snapped, "That's not the point. The point is that if I did pray, I should do it all by myself." Jesus' goal here seems to be faithfulness, nurtured by authentic prayer, generosity, and discipline. A regular time of fasting to nurture our hunger for a better world and to connect us to those who are deprived in some way from it. A regular time of prayer to deepen our trust and reliance on God and to shape our own vision and desires in the world. Generosity that is practiced every single day, reminding us that meritocracy isn't really possible when it comes to life and creation. We came into this world as gifts, and everything that comes under our stewardship, including our own lives, are to be used accordingly. The purpose of this fasting, prayer, and generosity isn't to earn anything. It is the pathway to becoming alive. These spiritual disciplines are best cultivated in private spaces, as Brian McLaren says, if we make our lives a show staged for others to avoid their criticism or gain their praise. We won't experience the reward of true aliveness. It's only in secret, in the presence of God alone, that we begin the journey toward aliveness. For most of the circles that most of us run in today, prayer and fasting in public don't really gain us any status or recognition. But I'd say public generosity still matches up from Jesus' time to ours. I'm sure some of us have been motivated to give to the X amount of dollars and above level to get our name in the list of public donors. Or maybe you volunteered to host your kids' class party to get that little pat on the back from the other parents. What Jesus is getting after here isn't to have people volunteering less to host the class party or give less to their alma mater. What he's focused on is each of us facing the truth of our inner motivations. Recognizing how often we are motivated by appearance or status. Not so that we can be shamed by that information, but so over time we can actually be freed from it. Now, honestly, you all get a front row seat every week in watching me deal with this conundrum right here in the giving of the sermon. Every week, one of your pastors, often me, is charged with going to our sacred text, reading, interpreting, reflecting, and putting together a reflection that somehow connects with you, the listener, and with we together, the congregation. I desire to create something that inspires, sometimes agitates in a productive way, and deepens our connection to God and to each other. But it is very easy for different motivations to creep in. To be praised, to avoid criticism, to be applauded. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being praised, and it's certainly nice when something lands so well that there's no need for criticism. It's wonderful when a preacher gives something so heartfelt and vulnerable that it is applauded. It is not a bad thing to feel good doing what you love. It's just that if my motivation shifts from creating something with integrity to creating something to generate praise for myself, I haven't been freed from the games of the world. I'm just still playing them. Jerzy Grotowski, the great Polish theater actor, wrote about this struggle in his admonitions and guidance to other actors. If you are driven by the desire to be acclaimed, to win applause and words of esteem, he said, you will make it impossible to create something great. Great works are always sources of conflict, he wrote. True artists do not have an easy life and are not to begin with acclaimed and carried shoulder high. At the start and for a long time, there is a hard struggle. The artist speaks the truth. The truth is nearly always different from the popular conception of the truth. The public does not like to be taxed by problems. It is much easier for the spectator to find in the play what they already know. And so, he wrote, there is a conflict. But afterwards, step by step, the same public begins to realize that it is these same artists, these peculiar artists, whom they cannot forget. Then there is a moment when you could be said to have achieved glory, and you have earned the right to speak the truths which are not popular ones. At that moment, he wrote, there are two possibilities. Either you have found that the social position is very important to you, and this means you have blocked all possible further development. You are already frightened of losing your position, so you only say the same things that others say. Or you still feel free as an artist. You are not yet oriented toward the public. You always seek the truth, even that which is hidden deepest. Then, he wrote to his fellow actors, then you will go further and will remain a great person. This is the kind of freedom that Jesus is coaching us into. And it's not a freedom only for the sake of your individual enrichment. It is the kind of freedom that can actually change the world. Freed from the world's games and pressures, God's desires can become more of our own. And when God's desires become our own, a generous, joyous, giving life isn't something that you have to chase after. It's one you can relinquish yourself to, one you can fall into with less anxiety, fear, and dread. The way to do that, according to Brian McLaren, is pulling away from the world's games and pressures to do some spiritual work in secret. You don't need a vast program or any talent. Jesus tells you 3 things to do. Give anonymously and talk to God about it. I mean, wake up every day and orient yourself to imagine that you are going to actively seek out ways to be generous that day. Maybe you're going to give that person who wants to cut you off on the highway a blessing instead of a 4-letter word. Maybe you're going to stop and listen to a person on a corner asking for money. Maybe you offer them some change, or maybe you offer to listen, just to listen and pray instead. Maybe you're going to try a different approach to that person that you always seem to be in conflict with at work. Ask them how their family is doing and really listen. Maybe you're going to look at your personal budget this month and see how you might carve out more for a nonprofit that needs it. No one is going to see that generosity except for God and you, so take note of how it affects you. Second, you're going to pray by yourself without the assistance of the liturgy or your favorite pastor. Well, you don't know how to pray? No problem. Jesus tells you the Lord's Prayer. It's right here. Maybe each day you focus on a phrase instead of the whole thing. Your kingdom come. Imagine what God's reign would look like among us. Imagine what it looks like for God's peace and justice to come to our city where we just lost 15-year-old Isaiah to gun violence at one of our schools. Imagine what that looks like in a country where we have a hard time solving problems together. Notice how a hungering for that realm of God's justice changes you. Perhaps you notice how reluctant you are to allow yourself to hunger for it, to allow yourself to imagine it. Third, you're going to fast in whatever way you can that protects your health. Maybe you skip breakfast one morning intentionally. You're going to walk around with the words, "Give us this day our daily bread," and notice your actual hunger. What does it feel like to hunger after daily bread? What does it feel like to hunger after God? What does it feel like to hunger after God's justice in the world? You're going to do all these things in secret, and if you're desperate to speak to someone about your experience, then fine. But do not do these things so that you can speak to someone about your experience. You see the difference? Do not do these things in order that you can speak to someone about them. Because God isn't trying to motivate you with guilt or admiration, and that's key. God is not trying to motivate you with guilt or admiration. God is trying to free you from those worldly games. Get this, God isn't even trying to make you more religious. God is inviting you into the freedom of a generous life oriented toward all the things that bring human beings true joy, so that we can together become a little more like the beloved community that God wants, that God desires for us all.